Bruce Whitlow ran his callous thumb along the grain of the red oak beam, checking for imperfections. His workshop smelled of sawdust and linseed oil, familiar scents that had grounded him for over 20 years. The restoration of the old Mackenzie barn was coming along well, each joint fitted with the precision that had built his reputation in Ellen Creek. "Dad, you coming in for dinner?" Virginia's voice cut through the whir of his table saw as he powered it down. He turned to see his 15-year-old daughter leaning against the workshop doorway, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She had Coraline's eyes, the same warm brown that could see through any pretense. "Just finishing up this joint," Bruce said, wiping his hands on his leather apron. "How was the birthday celebration?" Virginia shrugged. "Fine." Bruce knew that tone. It was the same one she'd used since Rose had moved in 4 years ago, the careful neutrality of someone walking on ice. "Just fine. Rose got me a watch." Virginia held up a sleek device that looked more like a small computer than a timepiece. $3,000, she said. Bruce whistled low. "That's some watch." "Yeah." Virginia stuffed the device in her jeans pocket. "Anyway, dinner's ready." As they walked toward the house, Bruce noticed his daughter's shoulders were tense. The old Victorian he'd restored after marrying Rose glowed warm against the Colorado evening. But something felt off. Rose met them at the kitchen door, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite having worked all day at her therapy practice. She wore the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. "There you are," she said, kissing Bruce's cheek. "I was starting to worry you'd forgotten about Virginia's special day." "Just wrapping up the Mackenzie project," Bruce replied. "That's quite a gift you got her." Rose's smile widened. "Only the best for our girl. It has all sorts of features: GPS, health monitoring, even educational apps." Bruce noticed Virginia flinch slightly at the word hour. After 6 years, his daughter still hadn't warmed to her stepmother. During dinner, Rose dominated the conversation, discussing her latest client successes and upcoming conferences. Virginia picked at her food, responding with polite one-word answers when addressed directly. "So what do you think of the watch, sweetheart?" Rose asked, cutting into her salmon with surgical precision. "It's nice," Virginia replied without looking up. "You could at least try it on." Rose's voice carried a slight edge. "I spent considerable time researching the best options." "I will." "When?" Virginia finally met her stepmother's gaze. "When I'm ready." The tension stretched across the table like a tight wire. Bruce had seen this dance before, Rose pushing, Virginia retreating, himself caught in the middle trying to keep peace. "Let her get used to it," Bruce said gently. "It's a big responsibility, wearing something that expensive." Rose's fork clinked against her plate. "Of course. I just want Virginia to understand how much thought went into choosing it." After dinner, Bruce helped Virginia with her algebra homework while Rose retreated to her home office to catch up on patient notes. The house settled into its evening rhythm, but something nagged at Bruce. Around 10, he knocked on Virginia's bedroom door. "Come in." She was reading on her bed, the watch nowhere in sight. "Where's the fancy timepiece?" Bruce asked, settling into the chair by her desk. Virginia glanced toward her dresser. "In the drawer." "Why aren't you wearing it?" His daughter closed her book and looked at him with those perceptive eyes. "Dad, can I tell you something without you getting mad?" "Always. Put it on when no one's watching. It'll make sense." Bruce frowned. "What do you mean?" "Just trust me. But be careful." Virginia reopened her book, signaling the conversation was over. Later that night, after Rose had gone to bed, Bruce retrieved the watch from Virginia's drawer. It felt heavier than it looked, the metal cool against his palm. He slipped it onto his wrist and waited. Nothing happened for several minutes. Then it vibrated once, a subtle pulse against his skin. The screen lit up with an interface he didn't recognize. Apps he hadn't seen before populated the display. One labeled Guardian was already active. Bruce's blood chilled as he realized what he was looking at. A stealth recording app. It had been capturing everything Virginia said and tracking her location. The data log showed weeks of activity, all being transmitted to a contact labeled simply Vire. His hands shook as he scrolled through the accumulated data. Every conversation, every movement, every private moment his daughter thought she had all of it recorded and sent to someone Rose was working with. Bruce sat heavily on the edge of Virginia's bed, staring at the evidence of betrayal glowing in his palm. His wife had been spying on his daughter. The next morning, Bruce moved through his routine like a man underwater. Coffee, breakfast prep, morning news all performed while his mind raced with implications. Rose bustled around the kitchen, getting ready for work, chatting about her schedule as if she hadn't violated every boundary of trust. "I'll be late tonight," she said, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "Session with the Morrison family ran over yesterday, so we're doing a makeup appointment." "Sure," Bruce replied, not trusting himself to say more. After Rose left, Virginia appeared in the kitchen, already dressed for school. "You figured it out," she said, glancing at the watch on his wrist. "How long have you known?" "Since the first day. The setup wizard asked me to authorize location and voice permissions." Virginia poured herself orange juice. "I said no, but the app's installed anyway." Bruce felt a surge of pride mixed with anger. His daughter had been protecting herself while he'd been blind to the threat. "Why didn't you tell me immediately?" "Because I needed proof of what she was doing, and I wanted to understand who Vire was." Virginia met his eyes. "I've been recording our conversations too, Dad. With my phone. She's not the only one who can play that game." At work, Bruce couldn't concentrate. The McKinsey barn restoration required precision, but his hands trembled as he tried to cut dovetail joints. Finally, he gave up and drove to his workshop. He fired up his computer and connected the watch, downloading every file. The data painted a picture that made his stomach turn. Hours of Virginia's private conversations. Her location data from school, friends' houses, everywhere she went. But worse were the conversations between Virginia and Rose that had been captured. In one recording from 3 days ago, he heard his daughter's voice, tight with frustration. "Why do you need to know where I go?" Rose's response came through cold and clinical. "Don't question protection, sweetheart. A mother needs to know these things. You're not my mother. Legally, I am. And legally, I'm responsible for your well-being." The recording continued with Rose asking probing questions about Virginia's friends, her feelings about Bruce, her memories of Coraline. Each question designed to extract information rather than show genuine interest. But the conversation that stopped Bruce cold was one from just yesterday, between Rose and someone identified as Vire. "The case will fall apart if Bruce keeps his image clean. We need leverage the girl's emotional distance, his history with grief. Paint him unstable." The voice responding was male, gravelly. "That's more difficult with his reputation in town. Everyone sees him as solid. Then we manufacture instability. The therapy sessions are helping. Dr. Henley is noting Virginia's resistance to maternal figures, her inappropriate attachment to her father." Appropriate for what? Custody modification. "If I can demonstrate that Bruce is encouraging unhealthy dependence and Virginia is suffering emotional damage under his primary care, I can file for emergency custody. Then we move on the assets." Bruce's vision blurred with rage. He played the recording 3 more times, making sure he understood every word. Rose wasn't just spying on Virginia, she was building a case to steal his daughter and destroy his life. That evening, Bruce sat in his workshop long after the sun set, staring at the evidence he'd compiled. 22 audio files, weeks of location data, and a pattern of manipulation that went back months. He thought about the changes in Rose since their marriage 4 years ago. The subtle shifts he'd attributed to adjustment to the normal growing pains of blending a family. Rose had insisted on joint ownership of the house, claiming it would help with tax benefits. She'd pushed to have her name added to the business accounts for emergency access. She'd suggested Virginia see a therapist to help process the loss of her mother and accept our new family dynamic. Dr. Henley had been Rose's recommendation, a colleague from her graduate program. She'd said, someone who specialized in adolescent adjustment disorders. Bruce pulled up the recording app and listened to Virginia's last therapy session, captured by the watch she'd been forced to wear to the appointment. "Virginia, tell me about your relationship with your father." "It's good. He's always been there for me. Some people might say you're too dependent on him, that it's not healthy for a girl your age to be so attached to her father. Those people would be wrong. Your stepmother has expressed concern that you reject her attempts to mother you, that you're deliberately maintaining distance. She's not my mother. She never will be. But she's your father's wife. Don't you think you owe her some respect? I respect people who earn it. Bruce heard Dr. Henley's frustrated sigh through the recording. Virginia, I'm going to recommend that we increase our sessions to twice a week. And I think it would be beneficial if your father joined us for some family therapy. The session ended with Virginia agreeing to nothing and Dr. Henley clearly annoyed by her lack of cooperation. Bruce realized Rose had been working this angle for months, maybe longer. She'd moved into their lives like a chess master, positioning pieces for an endgame he'd never seen coming. His first wife, Coraline, had died of an aneurysm when Virginia was 9. The grief had nearly destroyed him. He'd barely been able to function, let alone raise a traumatized little girl. The grief support group had been Ezra's idea, his way of forcing Bruce back into the world. Rose had been there as a volunteer facilitator, beautiful and compassionate, seemingly understanding exactly what he needed to hear. She'd listened to his stories about Coraline, comforted him through the worst nights, and slowly helped him remember that life could include joy again. Now he saw it differently. She hadn't found him by accident. She'd been hunting. Bruce accessed the business account from his computer, something that usually required both his password and Rose's fingerprint. But she'd used his laptop last week to quickly check something and hadn't logged out properly. What he found made his hands clench into fists. Invoices had been diverted to an account he didn't recognize. Payments to vendors he'd never heard of. The business that had taken him 20 years to build was being systematically drained. One recurring payment caught his attention. Monthly transfers to Consultancy Solutions, LLC, for $2,500. The dates matched up with some of the recordings he'd found. Bruce cross-referenced the payment information with a phone number from Vire's calls to Rose. The business address led to a virtual office in Denver, but the phone number was registered to Virgil Remy that he spent the next 2 hours researching Virgil Remy online. What he found painted a picture of a man who'd turned personal destruction into a business model. Remy had been a psychology professor at University of Colorado until 2018, when he'd been fired for falsifying research data in parental fitness studies. Several divorcing parents had paid him to skew psychological evaluations in their favor, giving them ammunition for custody battles. After losing his academic position, Remy had reinvented himself as a private consultant, teaching spouses how to manufacture evidence of psychological instability in their partners. His methods were sophisticated, often taking months or years to implement fully. The pattern was always the same: infiltrate, isolate, document, and destroy. Bruce understood now that he'd been living with an enemy for 4 years. Rose had studied him, learned his weaknesses, and built a strategy designed to take everything he'd worked for. But she made one critical mistake: that she'd underestimated Virginia. As Bruce backed up every file to his secure server, he realized his daughter had been trying to protect them both. She'd seen through Rose's manipulation from the beginning and had been gathering her own evidence. The watch was still recording, which meant Rose had no idea her plan had been discovered. Bruce smiled grimly as he formulated his own strategy. Rose wanted to play psychological warfare. He'd spent 20 years building things that lasted. Now he'd build a trap she couldn't escape. Bruce arrived at Ezra Canning's machine shop at dawn, knowing his oldest friend would already be there. Steam rose from Ezra's coffee mug as he adjusted the settings on a precision lathe, his movements efficient despite being 54 years old. The shop smelled of metal shavings and cutting oil, a scent that reminded Bruce of their early days working construction together. "You look like hell," Ezra said without looking up from his work. "Need to talk. It's important." Ezra shut down the lathe and turned, his gray eyes taking in Bruce's haggard appearance. "Coffee's fresh. Start talking." Bruce pulled out his phone and played the most damning recording: Rose and Virgil discussing how to paint him as unstable. Ezra's expression grew darker with each word. "Son of a bitch," Ezra muttered when the recording ended. "How long has this been going on?" "Months. Maybe years." Bruce explained everything: the watch, the financial theft, the therapy manipulation. "She's been setting me up for a custody battle while draining the business." Ezra poured himself more coffee, his jaw tight. "What do you need?" help figuring out how deep this goes, and maybe a call to Vesta. Ezra's sister Vesta had been Bruce's girlfriend briefly in high school before she'd left Ellen Creek for law school and never looked back. She was now a high-powered criminal defense attorney in Denver, with a reputation for taking on impossible cases and winning. Vesta's going to want to hear this directly, Ezra said. Reaching for his phone point 20 minutes later, Vesta's voice came through the speaker, sharp and focused. Bruce, Ezra, fill me in on the basics. This is serious. If she's been building a psychological profile for months, she's probably already laid groundwork with child services. What does that mean? Bruce asked. It means she's not just planning to file for custody. She's planning to win. These consultation firms, like the one you described, they don't work on contingency. They work on results. Bruce felt the workshop walls closing in. How do I stop her? You need to catch her before she can file. Once she makes her move, you'll be playing defense, and in family court, that's often a losing position. Vesta's voice carried the weight of experience. But if you can prove she's been conducting illegal surveillance and financial fraud, we can flip the script. The recordings prove the surveillance. They prove she was recording your daughter without consent, which is a felony in Colorado. But we need more. We need to document the financial theft, trace the money trail to this Remy character, and most importantly, we need to catch her in the act of coaching witnesses. Ezra leaned forward. What kind of coaching? The therapist, Dr. Henley. If she's been primed to provide testimony that supports Rose's custody claim, that's witness tampering. But proving it requires evidence of their collaboration. Bruce thought about Virginia's therapy sessions, how Dr. Henley seemed to push certain narratives. I might be able to get that evidence. Be careful, Vesta warned. If she suspects you know what she's doing, she might accelerate her timeline. File an emergency petition claiming immediate danger to the child. What would happen then? Temporary custody order within 24 hours. You get supervised visits while the investigation proceeds. Given her apparent resources and planning, she could stretch that process for months. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. There's one more thing, Vesta continued. I did some quick research on Virgil Remy while we've been talking. He's been linked to at least 6 other cases in the past 3 years. All high-asset divorces where one spouse suddenly developed documented psychological problems. What happened to those people? 3 lost custody completely. 2 settled for minimal asset division to avoid losing their kids. 1 committed suicide. Bruce's hands clenched into fists. I won't let her take Virginia. Then we need to be smarter than she is. Document everything, but don't change your behavior. Act like the devoted husband while you build your case. After the call with Vesta, Bruce spent the day researching Virgil Remy more thoroughly. What he discovered was a pattern of predatory behavior that made his stomach turn that Remy's academic downfall had been spectacular. The University of Colorado had discovered he'd been taking payments from divorce attorneys to skew his psychological evaluations. His reports had consistently painted one parent as unfit while the other as exemplary, regardless of the actual facts. But the scandal had only driven him underground, not out of business. Operating through a network of shell companies and virtual offices, Remy now offered family dynamic consulting to wealthy spouses planning divorces. His methods were sophisticated and tailored to each situation. For controlling husbands, he taught wives how to document emotional abuse through carefully staged interactions. For unfaithful wives, he showed husbands how to manufacture evidence of mental instability. His clients paid between $50,000 and $200,000 for complete family restructuring packages. Bruce found court records from 3 of Remy's recent cases. The pattern was identical each time. Months of careful documentation, a sudden filing claiming immediate danger to children, emergency custody orders that became permanent when the targeted parent couldn't recover from the initial legal setback. But one case file contained something useful. A client named Patricia Wells had turned on Remy after discovering he'd been recording her private conversations without consent. Her testimony had led to a sealed settlement, but the court documents included phone numbers and financial records that Bruce cross-referenced with his own business accounts. The connection was clear. Money from Whitlow Fine Joinery had been flowing to Remy's operation for 8 months. Bruce called Vesta with the update. "This is good," she said after reviewing the documents he'd emailed. "It establishes the financial relationship and shows a pattern of similar crimes. But we still need proof of ongoing coordination between Rose and Remy. I have recordings of their phone calls, made without their consent using equipment you didn't know was recording. That evidence might be admissible, but it's not guaranteed. We need something cleaner." Bruce understood. He needed to catch them actively coordinating their plan. That evening, he tested a theory. During dinner, he casually mentioned that he was thinking about taking Virginia on a father-daughter trip to see her grandparents in Wyoming. "That sounds lovely," Rose said, but her smile was tight. "When were you thinking?" "Maybe next weekend. Just the two of us, like we used to do." Rose's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I'm not sure that's a good idea right now. Virginia's been struggling with some attachment issues in therapy. Dr. Henley thinks it might be healthier if we all spent more time together as a family unit." Virginia looked up from her plate, eyebrows raised. She hadn't mentioned any struggling in therapy. "What kind of attachment issues?" Bruce asked. "Nothing serious. Just some difficulty processing her mother's death and accepting our current family structure. Dr. Henley thinks Virginia might be using you as an emotional crutch to avoid dealing with her grief." Bruce saw Virginia's jaw tighten. His daughter was listening to Rose rewrite her reality in real time. "I think I'd like to hear about this from Dr. Henley directly," Bruce said. Rose's smile became more forced. "Of course. I'll set up a consultation. She's been wanting to discuss Virginia's progress with you anyway." Later that night, Bruce listened to the recording captured by the watch. 20 minutes after their dinner conversation, Rose had called someone. The number matched Virgil Remy's phone. "He's getting suspicious about the therapy," Rose said without preamble. "Expected. You said he was intelligent. He wants to talk to Dr. Henley directly." "Not a problem. She knows what to emphasize. Paternal overattachment, resistance to maternal figures, signs of emotional regression. Standard indicators for custody modification. And if he pushes back, then we accelerate. File the emergency petition claiming he's becoming increasingly unstable and the child is at risk." Bruce's blood boiled as he listened to them discuss his daughter like a chess piece. "How quickly can you move?" Rose asked. "Papers are already drafted. I just need you to trigger the final documentation. Create a scene where he appears to lose control. Get it on record audio or video. Then we file within 24 hours claiming escalating domestic instability." "What about the financials?" "Clean transfers continue tomorrow. By the time he realizes what's happening, the business accounts will be restructured under your name. He'll be too busy fighting for his daughter to focus on the money." The call ended with them scheduling another conversation for the following evening. Bruce realized they weren't just planning to take Virginia. They were planning to destroy him completely. The next morning, Bruce arrived at his bank as soon as it opened. The account manager, Helen Torres, had handled Whitlow Fine Joinery's finances for over a decade. "I need a complete review of all account activity for the past 8 months, Bruce said, settling into the chair across from her desk. Helen pulled up the records, her expression growing concerned as she scrolled through the transactions. "Bruce, there are some irregularities here that we should have caught earlier." She turned her monitor so he could see. "These vendor payments, they're going to companies I don't recognize from your usual contractors." Bruce studied the screen. Consultancy Solutions, LLC, Behavioral Analytics, Incorporated, Family Development Partners. None of them were businesses he'd ever heard of. "The authorizations all came through your wife's access," Helen continued. "She has co-owner privileges on the business accounts." "How much total?" Helen calculated quickly. "Approximately $73,000 over 8 months. Bruce felt sick. Rose had been systematically draining his life's work to pay for his own destruction. "I need to freeze her access immediately," he said. Helen hesitated. "Bruce, I have to ask, is everything okay at home? These kinds of financial irregularities, especially involving a spouse." "Everything's fine," Bruce lied. "I just need to restructure the account management." After leaving the bank, Bruce drove to the Elling Creek Sheriff's Department. Deputy Troy Landon was someone he'd known since high school, a steady man who'd seen enough domestic disputes to recognize the warning signs. "Bruce, what brings you in today?" Troy asked. gesturing to a chair in his small office. I need to report financial fraud, but it's complicated. Bruce explained the situation carefully, sticking to facts and avoiding speculation. Troy listened without interruption, taking notes. This Virgil Remy character, I've heard that name before, Troy said when Bruce finished. Let me check something. He turned to his computer and ran a search. Here it is. Remy was named in a complaint filed by Sarah Mitchell in Denver last year. She claimed he'd helped her ex-husband manufacture evidence for a custody battle. What happened with that case? Charges were dropped when she refused to testify, but the initial report is on file. Troy looked at Bruce seriously. The thing is, Bruce, we've been watching Rose for a while. Bruce's surprise must have shown on his face. Her first marriage ended with abuse allegations against her ex-husband. Troy continued. Claims that were later proven false, but not before they destroyed the man's reputation and cost him custody of his kids. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because there was no proof of wrongdoing, just a pattern that made us uncomfortable. And because you seemed happy. Troy leaned back in his chair. But if she's doing this again, using the same playbook, I need to stop her before she files anything. What do you have in mind? Bruce explained his plan to document Rose and Remy's coordination while gathering evidence of the financial theft. Troy agreed to provide backup when needed, but warned that they'd need substantial proof before making any arrests. Family court cases get ugly fast, Troy said, and judges don't like feeling manipulated. If we can prove she's been running a con game, it won't just cost her custody, it could mean serious prison time. That evening, Bruce implemented the next phase of his plan. While Rose was in her home office, he accessed the keepsake box she kept on their bedroom dresser. Among her jewelry and mementos, he placed a second watch, one identical to Virginia's, but modified with enhanced recording capabilities. The watch he'd had Ezra help him modify would capture anything within a 20-foot radius and transmit directly to Bruce's secured server. Rose opened the keepsake box every night before bed, a ritual she'd maintained since moving in point 3 days later. The trap began producing results. Bruce listened to Rose's side of a phone conversation as she sat at her vanity, believing herself completely private. Dr. Henley, it's Rose. We need to schedule that family session soon. Yes, he's agreed to attend. I need you to focus on his overprotective tendencies and Virginia's emotional dependence. Exactly what we discussed. If he becomes defensive, note it as a sign of instability. We're moving to phase 3 next week. The recording continued with Rose coaching the therapist on specific talking points designed to make Bruce appear psychologically unfit. But the most damaging conversation came 2 nights later. Rose was on another call with Virgil Remy, discussing their timeline. He's isolated, paranoid, and about to be erased. You'll get the money Monday. After court, he'll be finished. Bruce listened to his wife describe his destruction with the cold efficiency of a surgeon discussing an amputation. The financial transfers are complete. Remy asked, everything liquid is secured. The business accounts are under my control. You won't be able to afford a decent attorney when we file. And the daughter, Virginia's still resistant, but that works in our favor. Dr. Henley will testify that she's showing signs of traumatic bonding with her father. Classic abuse victim behavior. Bruce's hands shook with rage as he saved the recording. Rose was planning to paint his relationship with his own daughter as abusive. Timeline, Remy asked, this weekend. I'm going to trigger the final confrontation at the cabin. Get him isolated, make him lose control, record everything. Then we file emergency custody Monday morning. Bruce realized Rose was talking about the eco cabin he'd restored in the mountains, a place where they'd supposedly go to reconnect as a family. She was planning to use it as the setting for his downfall, but she'd made a critical error. She'd revealed her entire plan while sitting next to the recording device he'd planted. Bruce spent the next day preparing his counter-strategy. He installed wireless cameras throughout the cabin property, hidden so well that even he had trouble spotting them. Each camera fed to a secure server that Vesta could access remotely. He also prepared copies of every piece of evidence he'd gathered: the recordings, financial documents, proof of Remy's criminal history, and documentation of the therapy manipulation. Multiple copies went to different secure locations. Finally, he had a conversation with Virginia, explaining what was going to happen and what she needed to do. I want to be there, she said when he finished. Absolutely not. This could get dangerous. Dad, she's been using me as a weapon against you for months. I deserve to see her face when she realizes she lost. Bruce looked at his daughter strong, perceptive, and more mature than any 15-year-old should have to be. If you're there, you follow my lead completely, no matter what she says or does. Virginia nodded solemnly. I've been waiting for this for 4 years. The cabin weekend would be Rose's moment of triumph, the culmination of her long game. She had no idea it would become her complete destruction. A.S. Bruce finished his preparations. He thought about something Vesta had said. We need to catch her before she can light the match. Instead, he was going to let Rose light the match and watch her burn in the fire she'd built. The mountain cabin sat in a grove of aspen trees, their golden leaves catching the afternoon light like scattered coins. Bruce had restored the structure 3 years ago, transforming a crumbling hunter's shelter into a rustic retreat, with modern amenities hidden behind weathered wood and stone. Rose stood on the wraparound porch, her phone pressed to her ear, thinking she was alone. Bruce watched from inside as she paced, her voice carrying clearly to the hidden microphones he'd installed. Everything's in position, she said. He's here, Virginia's here, and I'm about to implement the final phase. Virgil Remy's voice came through clearly. Remember, you need him to lose control completely. Physical aggression, verbal abuse, anything that demonstrates unfitness. He won't be able to help himself once I trigger the right pressure points. And the recording equipment. Rose patted her jacket pocket. Hidden camera and audio. Plus the girl's watch is still active. We'll have multiple angles of his breakdown. Perfect. File the emergency petition first thing Monday. I'll have the amended business contracts ready for signature Tuesday. Bruce stepped onto the porch and rose quickly into the call. Beautiful afternoon, he said, keeping his voice level. Gorgeous. I'm so glad we decided to do this. Rose's smile was radiant and completely false. Where's Virginia? Reading by the fireplace. She seemed tired from the drive. Rose nodded, already moving toward the cabin's interior. Bruce followed, knowing that everything happening now was being recorded from multiple angles. Inside, Virginia sat curled in a leather chair, looking younger than her 15 years. She glanced up as they entered, her eyes finding Bruce's for just a moment, a silent confirmation that she was ready. This is nice, Rose said, surveying the rustic living room. So cozy and isolated. The word isolated carried weight, and Bruce understood it was meant for the recording devices she carried. I thought we could all talk, Rose continued. About our family, about the future. She settled onto the couch, positioning herself so that both Bruce and Virginia were in her line of sight. Bruce noticed her hand rest casually near her jacket pocket. Virginia, sweetheart, Dr. Henley and I have been discussing your progress in therapy. Virginia looked up from her book. What about it? She's concerned about your relationship with your father. The dependency issues we've talked about. I'm not dependent on anyone. Rose's smile tightened slightly. Of course you think that, but sometimes we can't see our own patterns. Dr. Henley believes your attachment to your father is preventing you from forming healthy relationships with other people. Bruce stayed silent, watching Rose work. She was following a script, hitting specific talking points designed to provoke a reaction. What other people? Virginia asked. Me, for instance. I've tried so hard to be a mother to you, but you reject every attempt I make. Because you're not my mother, but I could be if you'd let me. If your father would encourage it instead of undermining my authority. The accusation hung in the air. Bruce felt the trap closing, designed to make him defensive. I've never undermined anything, he said carefully. Haven't you? Every time I try to set boundaries or establish consequences, you override me. You make me look like the villain while you get to be the hero. Rose was building towards something, her voice becoming more emotional. Do you have any idea how hard it's been trying to love a child who hates me? Trying to build a family with a husband who puts his daughter before his wife. Virginia stood abruptly. Nobody asked you to love me. Virginia, Bruce warned quietly. No, Dad. I'm tired of pretending. She turned to face Rose directly. You want to know why I don't accept you as a mother? Because you're not here for me. You're here for him, for this house, for the business. I'm just an obstacle you have to manage. Rose's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. That's an incredibly hurtful thing to say. But it's true, isn't it? Bruce watched Rose recalibrate, switching tactics. Her voice became hurt and vulnerable. I've given everything to this family. I've been patient with your grief, understanding about your resistance. But I can't keep sacrificing my own well-being for a child who refuses to accept love. She turned to Bruce, tears forming in her eyes. And you enable it. You let her treat me like an intruder in my own home. This isn't your home, Virginia said quietly. Excuse me. Your name might be on some papers, but this isn't your home. You don't belong here. Rose stood, her emotional control cracking. I am legally your stepmother and legally an owner of this property. I have every right to be here. Legally, Virginia repeated. Is that all you've got? Bruce saw Rose's hand move toward her pocket, activating whatever recording device she carried. This was her moment. Bruce, are you going to let her talk to me this way? Bruce met his wife's eyes. Actually, Rose, I think we need to talk. About a lot of things. Such as, Bruce pulled out his phone and played the recording of Rose's conversation with Virgil Remy. Her voice filled the cabin. He's isolated, paranoid, and about to be erased. You'll get the money Monday. After court, he'll be finished. The color drained from Rose's face. Should I play the one where you discuss coaching Dr. Henley? Bruce asked. Or maybe the one where you and Virgil plan to paint my relationship with my daughter as abusive? Rose's composure shattered completely. You've been spying on me. The way you've been spying on Virginia. Bruce set the modified watch on the coffee table between them. $3,000 to monitor a 15-year-old girl. That's some expensive paranoia, Rose. I was protecting her. From what? From you. Rose's voice turned vicious. From your sick attachment to her. From the way you use her to avoid dealing with your dead wife. Virginia flinched, but Bruce remained calm. Is that the story you're planning to tell in court? It's the truth. You're psychologically damaged, Bruce. You've never properly grieved Coraline, so you've transferred all that emotional dependency onto Virginia. It's textbook pathology. Rose was following her script even now, trying to provoke the breakdown she needed for her recording. And Dr. Henley will testify to this. Dr. Henley will testify to what she's observed. A girl who can't form healthy attachments because her father has made her his emotional surrogate for his dead wife. Interesting theory, Bruce said. Tell me, when did you and Dr. Henley first discuss this diagnosis? Rose realized her mistake immediately. I never discussed anything with her outside of professional. I have recordings of those conversations too. The silence stretched between them. Rose looked around the cabin as if seeing it for the first time, realizing she was trapped. You can't use illegally obtained recordings in court, she said finally. You're right, but the police can use them to obtain warrants. And Virgil Remy isn't as smart as he thinks he is. When they search his files, they'll find evidence of at least 6 other families he's destroyed. Rose's face went white. Virgil who? Don't. I know about the money, Rose. $73,000 from my business accounts, paid to your partner for services rendered. I know about the shell companies, the fake vendors, all of it. Bruce stepped closer, his voice dropping. I built you a life from pain, and you framed me using the same tools. Rose laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. You think you're so clever, but you don't understand what you're up against. Enlighten me. You're not the first man I fixed, Bruce. You're just the one who built his own cell. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Rose had just confirmed everything on camera. Fixed? Virginia asked quietly. Rose turned to her, no longer bothering to hide her contempt. Your father was broken when I found him. Pathetic, really. Sitting in that grief group, crying about his perfect dead wife. It was almost too easy. Bruce felt Virginia move closer to him, seeking protection from the venom in Rose's voice. Easy to what? He asked. To make him dependent on me. To position myself as his salvation. Men like you are so predictable, you'll give anything to anyone who makes the pain stop. Rose began pacing, her careful control completely abandoned. But you were supposed to be grateful. You were supposed to stay broken so I could keep fixing you. Instead, You got stronger. You started asking questions. Questions like why my wife was secretly recording my daughter. Questions that threatened everything I'd built. Bruce understood now that Rose saw people as constructions rather than human beings. She'd built a version of him that served her purposes, and when the real Bruce emerged, she decided to destroy him rather than lose control. What about Virginia? He asked. What was her role in your construction project? Rose glanced at his daughter with open dislike. She was supposed to transfer her attachment from you to me, grateful for having a mother figure again. Instead, she saw right through me from day one. Because I remember what a real mother looked like, Virginia said quietly. Your real mother is dead. Rose snapped. I'm what you have now. No, Bruce said firmly. You're not. Rose stopped pacing and stared at him. You can't just decide that, Bruce. We're married. I have legal rights. Had, Bruce corrected. You had legal rights. Until you committed multiple felonies. Rose's hand moved instinctively to her pocket, and Bruce realized she was still recording, still hoping to capture something she could use. You're going to regret this, she said. Both of you. I'll destroy everything you care about before I'm finished. You already tried, Bruce replied, and you failed. Rose stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the door. This isn't over, she said without looking back. Yes, it is. Bruce watched his wife of 4 years leave the cabin, knowing he'd never see her as a free woman again. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with frost covering the windows of Bruce's workshop. He'd spent Sunday securing every piece of evidence, coordinating with Vesta, and preparing Virginia for what was coming at 9:47 a.m. His phone rang. She filed the petition, Vesta said without preamble. Emergency custody, claiming immediate danger to the child. The hearing is scheduled for this afternoon. What about our evidence? Already submitted to both the court and the district attorney's office. Sheriff Landon executed the warrant an hour ago. Bruce closed his eyes, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. And they found Virgil Remy at his Denver office with evidence of 17 active cases. Client files, recording equipment, financial records showing payments from spouses across 3 states. He tried to run when he saw the badges. Through his workshop window, Bruce could see 2 sheriff's vehicles parked outside his house. Virginia stood on the front porch, watching the activity with grim satisfaction. What about Rose? That's the interesting part. She was already at the courthouse when the warrant was served, probably planning to present herself as the concerned stepmother protecting an endangered child. Instead, she walked into handcuffs. Bruce felt something that had been tight in his chest for months finally release. The DA wants to make an example of this, Vesta continued. Virgil Remy's operation has been destroying families for years. With our evidence and the files they seized, they can prosecute a dozen conspiracies. What charges is Rose facing? Wiretapping, fraud, grand theft, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and about 6 other felonies. The DA is talking about 12 years minimum, possibly more when they calculate the full scope of the financial theft. Bruce walked outside to where Virginia waited. Her face was calm, but he could see the relief in her eyes. Is it over? She asked. It's over. Deputy Troy Landon approached them, carrying an evidence bag containing the watch that had started everything. We'll need Virginia's testimony eventually, he said. But for now, she's free to go back to being a normal teenager. Virginia laughed, a sound Bruce hadn't heard in months. I don't remember what normal feels like. You'll figure out, Troy replied. Both of you will. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Rose maintained her innocence throughout, claiming she'd been trying to protect Virginia from an unfit father. But the evidence was overwhelming. Recordings of her coordination with Virgil Remy. Financial records showing systematic theft. Dr. Henley's testimony about being coached to provide false diagnoses. The modified watch revealing months of illegal surveillance. Most damaging was Rose's own confession at the cabin, captured on multiple cameras and audio devices. Her admission that she'd targeted Bruce deliberately, that she'd fixed other men before him, destroyed any remaining credibility. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Rose received 14 years in federal prison. Virgil Remy got 22 years after additional victims came forward. Dr. Henley lost her license and faced separate charges for insurance fraud related to the fake therapy sessions. 17 families across 4 states filed civil lawsuits based on evidence from Remy's files. The FBI opened a task force to investigate similar operations, using Bruce's case as a roadmap for prosecution. Virginia testified via video link, her quiet recounting of years of manipulation and surveillance providing some of the most compelling evidence. She faced Rose's attorney's questions with the same steady courage she'd shown throughout the ordeal. When it was over, Bruce and Virginia stood on the courthouse steps in Denver, breathing freely for the first time in years. "I'm proud of you," Bruce said. "For what?" "For seeing through her when I couldn't. For protecting us both." Virginia smiled. "Dad, you taught me to look at how things are built." Her whole story was put together wrong. It never would have lasted. 1 year later, Bruce stood in a grove of aspen trees where Coraline was buried, watching Virginia place the final board in their latest project. The open-air library they'd built together rose from the hillside like a natural extension of the landscape, its timber frame designed to weather decades of mountain seasons. The Hourglass Pavilion, Virginia read from the bronze plaque they'd mounted near the entrance. A place for those rebuilding after betrayal or grief. "Think people will use it?" Bruce asked. "They'll find it when they need it. Just like we found each other again." Virginia pulled the modified watch from her pocket, the device that had revealed Rose's conspiracy. Without ceremony, she placed it in a time capsule they prepared, sealing it beneath the library's main floor. "I never hated her," Virginia said, pressing the final board into place. "I just never trusted she was human." Bruce hammered the last nail, feeling the solid connection of wood to wood. "We build better when we remember what fell." The library stood complete, a testament to the idea that destruction could become the foundation for something stronger. Around them, the aspens whispered in the mountain wind, carrying stories of survival and renewal. Bruce looked at his daughter, who'd grown into someone Coraline would have been proud of, strong, perceptive, and unafraid of difficult truths. The years of Rose's manipulation had scarred them both, but they'd emerged with their bond stronger than before. In the distance, the lights of Elling Creek glowed warm against the gathering dusk. Tomorrow would bring new projects, new challenges, new opportunities to build something lasting. But tonight, Bruce and Virginia sat in their library, surrounded by the evidence that some foundations can't be shaken, no matter how much force is applied against them. The silent frame had been shattered, and in its place stood something genuine and unbreakable.